All right. So there we go. So couple of housekeeping things. One thing is we're going to run through some Q&A here shortly at the end. Just guys, please understand these are new regulations to us too. We try to think of as many scenarios and situations as we can. Sometimes we don't think of them all. So if I tell you that we'll have to research your question a little more, please understand, you know, sometimes the anomaly question comes up and we're just simply not able to hit every situation that we should have to begin with. Got a PowerPoint here. I'm going to share some of it. I'm going to share the slide and we'll run through a few things. Move this over to my side of your side of the screen that we'll be sharing. All right. Is everyone able to see my screen there? No? I think it's spotted on me. Hang on, guys. All right. Sorry about that, guys. We'll roll on now. So put this slide up here just so that people watching down the line will know when this was recorded and what was going on. So this is the KBEMS field staff. I just wanted to highlight them, man. I have a hardworking team. They are fantastic. Many of you probably know Paula and Ray, and some of you may know Eddie as well. Eddie just came on this past summer and has been a tremendous asset to my staff and to the KBEMS team as well. So these are just some of the inspection areas that we have throughout the state. This is how we divide up what and who is inspected by which inspector. You'll see here, for those of you who were in the Pennyroyal district and the Derby district, Paula will be handling the Pennyroyal district, which is the western end of the state, and Eddie will be handling the Derby area, which is basically the Louisville and northern Kentucky area. And Ray stayed in the eastern end of the state. So just to let you know, this is where this is what prompted this webinar. Really, is these new regulations we've got. If you haven't read them, please go to our website, hit on the legal tab up at the top, pull them up. This is what governs what you do on a daily basis. So I cannot ask you enough to go through these, know them, understand them, and just digest them, because this is what governs what you do on a daily basis. So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to go into a review of the new, I sent yesterday an updated agency license and vehicle inspection manual that will basically lay out the whole inspection process. We're going to review it and really just hit the things that have changed in the process since before. There's some new things, there's some not so new things, and some subtle changes that'll really affect the way we do inspections. We do have a new agency renewal and inspection process. I'll go through that as well. And then, as I stated earlier, we're going to answer some questions we've had from previously submitted submissions to, well, one was our ticketing system, and two, I put out a call for clarifications a couple of months ago and got some really good questions. So hopefully we can answer some of your questions before you ever even ask them. But if not, we've got the chat section open. If we don't hit your question in the FAQ section, feel free to ask it at the end. So in the interest of time, we are going to limit this to 2 hours. If we don't get to your specific question, feel free to submit it either through the ticketing system or through the chat feature. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can, but I understand that there's a lot of questions surrounding this and that you guys have things that you want to know, and believe me, we want you to know. And we'll collect all those questions. We'll publish responses to them and probably like a secondary FAQ, or we'll just compile them all into one document and we'll roll from there. So first things first, let's jump into the new agency license and vehicle inspection manual. Pull up what I'm sharing here. Here we go. Jump up to the top. So any of you who want to follow along, we're in the introduction section now. So I just highlighted a few things here, guys, that I thought would be either different or something that you should note. This section here, this is basically our internal blurb. Please understand that we're not attorneys. We do look at these regulations on a normal basis, but the advice that we give and any information is strictly operational and is our interpretation. If you need specific legal advice, contact your legal counsel. So there's the the legal blurb. So I created this. I'm going to make it a little smaller so that you can see the entire thing. This is a infographic that lays out the entire inspection process. So as you'll see, the inspection schedule will come out November to December of the year preceding your inspection. So like for 2019, we would schedule it November, December of this year. Now, with that said, there was a lot of things that needed to be shored up this year, so we'll probably be late getting that out, but this is pretty standard for what you should expect going forward. On January 1st, the inspection and renewal app will open. You'll see more about that here shortly. We've combined the inspection and renewal process into one. It will be lengthy, but it will be worth it. So 30 days prior to your on-site inspection, when your inspector shows up at your agency to do your vehicles and the on-site inspection, 30 days prior to that, you need to have your inspection and renewal app completed, and that includes the payment within that. So within 14 days prior to that, your inspector will have reviewed the app, will contact you, and if any changes are required or if any additional information, just any of those types of scenarios, just like we have in the past, but this will be within a single application rather than in the within the policy and protocol portal that we had before. And then the day of the inspection, it kind of lays out there what you can expect. We'll come in, we'll inspect your agency, we'll inspect your documents that we couldn't have done previously, but just for whatever reason, personnel files, things that we don't want to collect within our system. So that'll be checked, and then just your on-site inspection overall. So I wanted to make that just a little simpler if we could, just to make it a little clearer, make everybody, put us all on the same page there, so to speak. I'm gonna make it larger again so that when we go through the type, we can all see. So this part here, the ensure that your information in KBEMS is up to date. This is super important for a couple of different reasons. One, and you'll see down here, we're asking everybody, especially you all as agency administrators, to keep all of your email, contact information, everything in KBEMS up to date. so that when we need to contact you, we can do that inside the system and outside, but with the information that we get. This part up here, guys, your employee roster and your fleet roster are super important, because this is where we check your employees to make sure that everybody is certified or licensed. Those of you who have employees who still haven't renewed their certification or license this year, you're either going to, or you may have already received a roster of those individuals that are attached to your agency who have not renewed. And we check those at the time of inspection, and we also check them about this time, because we realize that within 2 weeks, you may, unbeknownst to yourself, have an employee who has not renewed their license or certification. And your fleet as well. That's where we go. We drive our inspection sheets off of the fleet that's within your agency. And if that's not up to date, then we can't do an accurate inspection. So just make sure that those, if you change a vehicle, if you add, delete, whatever the case may be, go into KBEMS, complete the application, and let us do the inspection and roll through that. This part right here, so we make every attempt that we can to try to get all your inspections done along with the on-site agency inspection, excuse me. However, some of you know you have large agencies, and doing 50 and 60 vehicles in a day for a single inspector it's nearly impossible. So we may divide those up into bite-sized portions so that we can get through it and we don't get anybody hurt. So we make every attempt to do them all at the same time, but I'm sure you all understand that sometimes that's just not possible. This portion right here. So we need to have somebody on site when we do the vehicle inspections that is familiar with that vehicle or is familiar with the agency. And for those of you who are agency directors, please understand it's nothing personal, but it doesn't have to be you. It can be somebody that's familiar. It can be your designee. I get it. I know you guys probably want to be around when that's going on, but it's just not always possible. And in the interest of time, I have expectations for my staff, for the field staff here, and they have to keep their schedules pretty tight. So we don't give a whole lot of leeway for reschedules, just because I hold them to a pretty high standard when it comes to their schedules. So please understand that when we set those, they kind of need to be held to. Now we understand, look, family emergencies, health emergencies, everything, stuff like that comes up. But if we can hold to the inspection date, we would really, really like to keep to those, but especially this year, because we're going to kind of be behind to begin with, just because of getting started late due to our new processes. Jump down to the desk review portion. As I said earlier, you'll receive access to that application at the beginning of the year. Payment of your renewal fee is actually part of that application now. In years past, you've been able to run right up until now and still pay your renewal fee for your agency. And with that said, there are 4 or 5 agencies who still have not renewed this year. If you're in question of whether or not it is yours, drop me an email, paul.phillips@kctcs.edu, and I'll make sure that yours, if you haven't received your license yet, then let me know, and we'll see what we can figure out. So that the desk review process here is laid out in that infographic I spoke about earlier, or I showed you earlier. So the KBEMS inspector will review your documents 30 days prior. Within 14 days prior, they will contact you with any updates or edits that are needed. So guys, this is where the scheduling comes in, and it's super important. So if we have scheduled a date and we haven't heard from you, and especially with that, when we hit that 30-day window and we haven't heard from you, if there isn't an inspection and renewal application in there that has all of the documents contained within it, it's going to be considered a failed inspection, and all the fees that come along with a re-inspection will be incurred. And if we do a reschedule and it pops in there and we don't hear anything from you, then these things just per regulation, they roll into the disciplinary process here, and that's per KRS chapter 311A. So we don't want to see that happen. So just communicate with us and make sure that we all stay on the same page. So here we're going to roll into some of the policies that are required. I know there's a lot of questions around some of these. I may actually even answer some of the FAQs as we go through here. We'll still hit those on the other side, but I may actually speak about some of them now just because they're fresh on my mind. The things that I've highlighted are either new or noteworthy. You know, like I see here, the org chart, it's not necessarily new. This is the same thing we've been doing for 10, 15 years. So it's nothing new. I'm not, just in the interest of time, I'm not gonna read through this thing because I would bore you guys to death. And also, I just don't see it as necessary since it's not new. So the policy here, so basically before you had to do a pre-employment and a pre-employment health assessment for anybody that you had offered a position to with your agency. And you had to do, some of you did annual health assessments, whether it be a physical or just a piece of paper asking them to let you know what medications and illnesses they had or medical history, whatever the case may be. Now we've gone a little broader, and all you have to have is a policy for how that is going to happen, how you're going to make that happen. Making the pre-employment health assessment, physicals, whatever the case may be with all that, is up to you and your agency, how you administer that. You just have to have a policy and lay out what that process is. It has to include the reporting mechanisms for work-related illnesses or injuries. Just want to make sure that your employees know how to go about that process as well. Next is this one is new. So this is a written plan for providers to consult with online adult and pediatric medical direction. You see here, pay particular attention to the bullet points within each one of these in the inspection manual. Those are going to be, we're going to have a really big focus this year on making sure that every policy and protocol, or policy as the case may be, is containing all of these items that are needed. Sometimes in the past, having to look in 14 different places was problematic for us. So making sure that each bullet point is addressed in a policy that you have as they're required. So you'll see here that it has to have the availability of medical direction 24 hours a day, the availability of medical direction during an emergency event. I'm not going to read all these. You all can handle that, but just make sure that you hit within your written plan all of these bullet points. Next, a plan and records for provision of continuing education for staff. This is really similar to what you've done in the past, but now you just have to have a plan and the records for it. I think this actually may have been something that was required in the past, but we just restated it here to make sure that everybody was clear. Okay, written policy regarding the appropriate destination of a patient who expires during transport if a valid Kentucky EMS DNR or most form is present. For those of you who don't know, the Kentucky EMS DNR is not the only form of a do not resuscitate order that Kentucky EMS is allowed to accept now. There is the most form. It does have, there are several items that it has to hit, and those are included. I believe there is a link to Chuck. I believe Chuck O'Neill is on here as well. I believe Chuck did a video on the most form and what all is required out of that, but I just wanted to make you all aware of that. And so there's been some confusion from providers, EMTs, paramedics, about how do we handle a patient if we're going through a neighboring county or if we're 4 counties away. We've got a critical patient, the patient expires. How do we handle, do we contact the coroner? Do we contact the hospital? Do we return to our hospital? Do we go to the local hospital? There's just so much confusion over that. And we thought it would be a good idea for you guys as agency administrators to spell that out and really make it crystal clear to your employees so that they know this is what we do in all of these situations. So and now, as part of your employee and orientation program, we've required an employee orientation program for quite a while. But now, as part of that, is your validation of your EMTs, paramedics, your employees, NIMS, ICS 100, 200, 700, and 800 within 60 days of employment for anybody who staffs a licensed vehicle. Those are online, and I'm pretty sure, I'm 99% sure they're free. So you can go online with your employees during their orientation phase and make sure that they have 100, 200, 700, and 800, and then they're good to go. I don't think there's much down here that is different. There may be some things that are worded differently, but you know, they still need to know your geographic area. They need to know your policy for disinfecting your ambulances. You know, how to go about maintaining the lights on an ambulance. Just stuff that's within your agency that you want them to know. But these specific bullet points have to be hit within that policy as well. You're welcome to add anything on there that you all feel is policy agency specific. Professional liability malpractice insurance has always been required, but now we require a minimum of $1 million in professional liability malpractice insurance. So the minimum is new, the insurance requirement is not. So this one is a new one as well. This is a policy regarding which employees are approved to provide medical services off duty by the agency's medical director and the manner in which workers' comp and general liability insurance covers employees off duty. One of the big things that's within this is the next sentence. The policy shall be signed by both the agency's administrator and medical director. It has to be reviewed annually, and it needs to include the items that are below. Guys, this is a big deal. We've had several disciplinary cases for people that were working when they were off duty, and you know, it's a catch-22 for the medic or EMT who thinks that they are working on behalf of their agency, then they found out they're not. This just allows you to spell it out and also tell them, you know, how they can act, what equipment they can use, how, you know, what they can take off site from your agency when they leave. You just spell out all those things, which is really important and protects you and the provider themselves. So this is sort of new, but not necessarily. So each agency in the county in which the agency's base station or a satellite is located. So just realize that that's any area in which you participate. So if you have a service area that encompasses 2 or 3 counties, realize you need to participate in state disaster and preparedness exercises within the preceding 12 months of an inspection. Now, with that said, there's no requirement here on what type of exercise that can be. That can be as simple as a tabletop. It can be a full-out drill. That's kind of up to you guys, but just make sure that you're keeping your records and that your employees know and that you're coordinating those with your county EM. The next new item on here is a written scope of care policy to include the types of services performed, the limitations of response, and the types of medical teams provided. There's another provision within the regulation that it is on us, KBEMS, the board office, to place the agency into the classification which they are best fit for. Some of the some of our classifications, especially let's just take class 3, for instance, which is the specialty care. There are 3 sub-classifications within there. There is the neonate, pediatric, and adult specialty care populations. This allows the class 3 agencies to really narrow down their focus and to address which ones of those specialties they want to pick. They can choose any, or they can choose all. They can choose 2 of the 3, 1 of the 3, or all 3. It's that's up to the agency, but we here in the board office have the opportunity to place them into the specific niche that they're supposed to fill. So this is new, but not new. So the mutual aid agreement requirement has always been there with any agency within the same or contiguous counties. The difference now is that we've given an opportunity, if you're unable to get a mutual aid agreement with another Kentucky licensed ambulance service, in the same area, we don't want those folks being able to hold you hostage from being able to get your license and get through your renewal properly. So here is you have to ask for it. They have to say no, and you keep your request. We just don't want them being able to hold you up from doing the business that you're doing, which is providing quality care to your patients and the citizens that you serve. And this is a dispatch affiliation agreement for PSAP, call taking center, whatever you want to call it at this point. Again, if you're unable to get an agreement with them, you can just retain your attempts and just make sure that those are on file so that, when we ask for an affiliation agreement, you can say, here's the documentation that we have for our attempts. They didn't want to sign, and you've done your due diligence and you have fulfilled your end of the agreement by retaining those records. The next is a master medication list. This is something that this is new, but your master medication list needs to be consistent with your KBEMS approved medical protocols. So any medication that's listed within your protocols, you need to have on your master medication list. Now the fallout or the result of this is that we are going to use that master medication list and check against your stock in your ambulances to make sure that you're carrying the items that are within your protocol. We've heard of agencies that will just remove a certain medication. Their employees didn't know it, and the next thing you know, they're looking for it and they don't have the equipment that they think they have or that is needed to take care of patients. So now we're going to check against that list when we do the inspection. None of that stuff looks new. It's all medical director requirements, which are still the same. FCC license. Looks like a typo up there. It looks like I tried to start typing something and forgot. So this may or may not be new. I think many of these requirements are the same except for the retention requirements. You've always had to keep your electronic patient care reports, but now we have spelled out the retention. You have to maintain them and ensure confidentiality and safekeeping for at least 7 years from the date on which the service was rendered. So if the service was rendered today, December 19th, 2018, you would not be able to purge those until December 19th of 2025. And if it is a minor, then it has to be at least 3 years after the minor reaches the age of majority. So that will, if they're 3, if they're 2 or 3, even 1, then you've got a long retention of those patient care reports. The rest of it seems to be pretty in line with what you all are already doing, which is submitting data. We actually have 100% data submission, and my hat's off to you guys for making that happen. That was something some of you may or may not know. I was previously the data administrator here, and getting all of this information and all the data into our system, it's huge. And we participate in a lot of national work groups and the NASIMSO, the National Association of State EMS Officials. It's a mouthful. And I can tell you that we're leading the charge with data, and it's a pretty cool thing. And my hats are off to you guys for making that happen as well. So personnel files. We always had to have these. These are, again, you'll see these are the on-site inspection items. We won't require upload of these during the process of renewal, but we will check these things when we're on site. So again, we're going to check. You need to have a criminal background check that's administered by the Kentucky Administrative Office of the Courts, the AOC, and that has to be annually. It has to be pre-employment, and you need one annually. So make sure that you're doing an annual background check on all your employees. So you'll have to have a copy of their certification, and licensure card, and you'll also need to retain a copy of their NIMS, the 100, 200, 700, and 800 that we spoke of earlier. And then for the actual driver's training requirement has changed as well. It used to be 8 years or 8 hours initial, 4 hours renewal. Well, now it's just 4 hours. That is consistent with the requirements that are laid out in the 560, and that's section 2 of that one. And I don't believe the requirements have changed a whole lot as to what is required within a driver's training class. We don't require a specific EVOC or any of the cookie cutter classes. You have the ability to create your own class as long as it hits the requirements that are in the 560. Next is you have to retain staffing schedules for the previous 12 months. This is due to us needing to check to make sure that you are staffing properly. There is a requirement now that 25% of your ambulances be staffed by paramedic. Staffed, those are staffed ambulances. So if you have 4 ambulances on the street, you have to have at least one that is a ALS paramedic unit. Yes, AEMT does make a unit ALS for billing purposes, but as per the regulation, you have to have 25% that has a paramedic on board. And that's stated down here. I highlighted the staffed part. There was some confusion in the beginning. Some of you may actually have 10 ambulances. You staff 4 of them at a time. There was some concern that we would be expecting you to have 3 of those 4 ALS or paramedic level, and that is not the case. There's also been some confusion of the inspection levels. So we have a BLS and we have an ALS level for inspections for ambulances. I understand some of you run AEMTs on your trucks, but it's either BLS or ALS. There is no AEMT level for equipment required on an ambulance. A lot of this is just housekeeping. Don't let your license lapse. Don't wait until December 19th to renew your agency license. And now that it shouldn't be an issue because we're going to allow renewal at any point during the year. But we've had that open since July, and it's crazy that there's still agencies who haven't renewed. What to do during the event of cease operations. If you're going to sell, there is a new requirement here. I may have highlighted it down here. No, but so there is a requirement if you sell or transfer your license that application, a new application, a license transfer application, be submitted at least 10 days prior to the sale or transfer. And that is a direct ownership change. So and I noted it here, if a holding company owns a corporation that owns an EMS agency, only the sale of the direct corporation that owns the EMS agency will impact the actual ownership at our level of the agency and would require an agency application submission for sale or transfer. Ensure during your business processes that there are no lapses of service during the sale or transfer of a license. If there is a lapse in service, then somebody's unmuted if you wouldn't care to mute. So we can't have a lapse in service. If we have a lapse in service, then as the regulation states, the agency license becomes null and void if there is ever a lapse in service for longer than 24 hours. I believe that's how it's stated. If I'm not, again, that's operational advice, and I'm not an attorney. And all right, somebody took over. All right. Okay, so here's the new ambulance purchasing specification requirements. As many of you know, for the longest time we've been under the Triple-K requirements, and those were being sunsetted. They were going away. So when we redid these regs, we adopted the CAS, the Commission for Accreditation of Ambulance Services, ground vehicle standards. They're much the same today. Now, I can't say that in 5 years they won't look a whole lot different than one another. Triple-K has indicated that, or the federal government, which administers the Triple-K standard, and that was always just a vehicle standard for purchasing of federal ambulances. But somehow or another, everybody adopted it as their vehicle standard, and it became the gold standard for ambulances. Currently, there is the Triple-K, there's the NFPA 1920, I can't remember what the specific number is, and then there is the CAS GVS. Kentucky decided to go with the CAS GVS just because it was the most, to us and to the committee and the board, it seemed to be the most non-technical version of a vehicle standard for ambulances. So with that background, so basically I put a chart here. If it's purchased before January 1 of 2019, you have to adhere to the Triple-K. And if it's purchased after January 1, 2019, then it has to be CAS GVS compliant. Now remember, purchased. So if you purchase an ambulance today, you're still currently under the Triple-K. If I'm not mistaken, right now though, you can get dual certified because they are, as I said, much the same document. But again, in 5 years from now, they may go different directions and they may look differently. So you'll have to be CAS compliant. We're going to stick with the present remount requirement, and that is that you have to be, if you get an ambulance remounted, that it has to be compliant with the standard that was in effect when that ambulance was purchased. Like now, if you get an ambulance remounted and it was a Triple-K standard ambulance, it has to be, you have to have a letter from the manufacturer stating that they did nothing to that ambulance or that box that would predate the original date of manufacture, or the standard, which would be the Triple-K, that was in effect on the date of manufacture. So going forward though, and this probably won't be an issue for a little bit because we won't have any GVS ambulances that are remounted for probably a couple of years, but just going forward, it'll be the same thing. There'll have to be either a decal or a letter from the manufacturer stating the same thing, that they did not do anything to predate the original date of manufacture. note down here, this is a note for you guys. So CAS requires that all final stage ambulance manufacturers, and that's basically anybody that's producing ambulances, would register with them. So they cannot get CAS certified. They cannot be GVS certified vehicles if they are not registered with CAS. It is on you guys to make sure that anybody you contract with to build an ambulance is registered with CAS. That there is a link here you can go to, and you can find out who all of the final stage ambulance manufacturers are. If you want to buy from a specific agency and they are not listed on there, they can get certified. You would just want to tell them, hey, we will buy an ambulance from you, but you need to get certified through CAS so that we can be GVS certified, because if not, and it comes into the state, we can't allow it. I don't even have the ability to allow a non-GVS ambulance after January 1st to come into Kentucky. So just keep that in mind, that if you're looking at buying an ambulance, you want to make sure that they are a registered final stage ambulance manufacturer with CAS. All right, so this is a new vehicle inspection. So basically a new vehicle is any vehicle that's not currently on your roster, whether that would be specifically new or it would be one that you are purchasing from another agency. But for our purposes, if it's coming onto your agency roster for the first time, or actually even if it's the second or third time, if it's not on your roster and it's coming back on, then it is a new vehicle to us. So basically, if the vehicle does not meet the minimum standards, violations must be corrected prior to use as an ambulance. But if it's not, if you're not able to correct them, like we have some people that'll bring their vehicles here for initial inspection, if those cannot be fixed while we're on site, then you'll have to submit a new application and pay a reinspection fee, and you won't be able to use the ambulance until we have certified that it's up to snuff. So kind of know that, just that it has to meet the standard, or we'll have to do a reinspection, and that requires another application and another fee. Temporary vehicles, a lot of this is the same. There is a new word in there, and it is in an emergency situation. So one of the things that we didn't want this time was, I got a new ambulance, I got a new toy, I want to be the first one to make a call in it. So I want to go ahead and put it in service. I'm going to call it a temporary vehicle. That's not necessarily true. So a temporary vehicle usage is only allowed in an emergency situation. And what I define, or we define as an emergency situation, is one that would result in a reduction of staffing coverage for the agency. So if you have 4 ambulances in service, you blow an engine on one, you get another one in, or you happen to be getting a new ambulance that day, and you would have a crew sitting around. If you didn't have that new ambulance, then yes, you can use it as a temporary. But it's not just an operational, hey, I've got a new toy and I want to use it. So, but you still have to put in an application and notify us that that is the case. And again, temporary vehicles are required to meet all of the KBEMS regulations in service. Just because it's a temporary vehicle doesn't mean that you're not required to have all of the equipment that's necessary or to meet all of the requirements that are in place. I am not going to go over every equipment list. You guys can go over those. I'm going to hit some of the items when we do the FAQ. Again, I implore you to go over these and know them, understand them. If you have any questions, submit a ticket to our system. I'm glad to provide clarification. As a matter of fact, I would much rather do that on the front side than to have to come in and write a bunch of violations next year, because there was some not clarified items. But just understand, one of the new things that we have done within these regulations is each classification and subclassification now has its own equipment list. If some of you remembered previously, we had a single equipment list, and if you were a non-transport agency, you had to apply for waivers for the items that weren't included in your operational needs. And now we've kind of addressed those within each specific license classification. Sorry, not making you dizzy. Makes me dizzy too, but just want to roll on down to the bottom. And that's why this is so long too, because there is a specific equipment list for each one of the classifications. So violations, I'm going to skip down to the second one, and then I'll come back up to the first. So as many of you know, previously we had allowed you to do on-site correctable items. If we found something, you know, hey, look, there's everything on your ambulance now has an expiration date. We understand that you can go cross-eyed trying to look for those dates. People make runs, and you have employees who don't restock correctly. Get it. We understand. So we allow you to correct those things. What we don't want is you relying on the on-site correctable situation to just not really police your ambulance and look and make sure that all the things that are supposed to be on there are, and to say, they'll let us fix it whenever we do the inspection. So what we've done now is, if you have 3 on-site correctable violations within a single vehicle, that vehicle has failed. And a failed inspection results in a re-inspection and an assessment of the re-inspection fee. Again, that may sound harsh, but at the same time, we had a lot of agencies that were just relying on the on-site correctable to just run through the inspection, and we'll just fix it as we go. Well, your patients deserve better than that. They deserve to know that everything is on your ambulance, that it is within date, and that you've been diligent about making sure of those things. So we're gonna kind of tighten the belt a little bit. Additionally, I'm going to go back up to the top item here. Medications and supplies, they're not considered acceptable if they're outside the manufacturer's expiration date, unless the FDA has issued an exception. As many of you know, in the past year, they issued an exception on specific medications from a specific manufacturer. Now, some people thought that was just a blanket epi 1 to 10,000 could just be used for an extra year. Well, that's not the case. It was a specific manufacturer, specific lots of that drug within that manufacturer, and it wasn't just a blanket, epi can be used for an extra year. So, make sure that you all are diligent about checking those items and making sure that the FDA's expiration date exceptions. We put out a lot of the guidance. When we get it, we'll share it with you guys. One thing of note, if you all have a true shortage within your agency, and we understand, like, if you've contacted all the manufacturers, you can't find D50, but you want to start using glucagon in its place, submit a medical protocol application here, put in a letter in there that you are going to temporarily suspend the use of D50, and you're going to replace it with glucagon, for instance, and then you will return to normal operations with D50 whenever that medication becomes available, or whenever you're able to get an allotment of it. That's perfectly acceptable. Those will come in here. We'll evaluate them and approve those. We just need to make sure that we have a paper trail, guys. You can't just decide that you're going to use a new drug and not put it in your protocols. Okay, so, and this has been in there before, but I want to reiterate it. No shell game, guys. At no time shall it be acceptable to move equipment for supplies from one vehicle to another during the inspection. Look, we've all seen it. Pretty hip to the game and know when it's happening. So let's make sure that we're not just trying to have 2 spine boards for 6 ambulances and running them back and forth when you think we're not looking. So now with that said, we do understand that some of your operational practices are that, ALS equipment is stored in a storeroom. You come on to shift, every ambulance is stocked BLS, but when you come on, you grab your ALS equipment and go to that ambulance. That's understandable. That's acceptable. It's during the inspection process is when it gets shady. So just wanted to reiterate that. Hey, if everybody can mute, we've got a couple of people that looks like aren't on mute. If you could mute yourself, it'd be helpful because I'm getting some feedback here and I can't hear myself. Right. So this is just general information. You all can read it again. If you have any questions, you're welcome to ask either in a ticket or online or here momentarily. We're going to run through. I'm going to jump back to my PowerPoint, and I have some of the items that I had collected previously from our call for questions. I'm going to address some of these real quick, or try to quickly. So this question is regarding the stowing of equipment or bracketing. Please clarify if this is just inside personnel compartments or the whole vehicle, and please clarify what would constitute a proper stowage means for medical jump bag. All equipment within the entire ambulance, guys, everything. And that includes personal items of the crew, whether it be a personal clipboard, a purse, a duffel bag, anything of that nature that is over 3 pounds has to be stowed. As far as the bracketing and mounting goes, those items need to be commercially manufactured devices, the mounts, that are specifically designed for the purpose of securing that item, whether it be a monitor mount, suction device mount, just whatever the case may be. If it's a commercially designed device, it needs to be specifically designed for that purpose. Or you can use a seat belt. Not a huge fan of this, but we have to understand these are permanently mounted devices that are mounted to the structure of the ambulance. And if that's the case, those are allowable as well. So I'm just going to read this real quick. The section 5 of the 501 states a licensed agency shall not be disciplined for responding to calls outside of its geographic service area if the agency is providing interfacility medical transfer to residents of its service area who are patients in facilities outside of its service area for the purpose of returning the patients to their home service area, excuse me, or transporting them to another healthcare facility or another health facility. A section in the 555 states an agency shall not respond to requests for emergency service outside of its licensed geographic area or geographic service area without first receiving authorization from the licensed agency in the geographic service area in which the request originates. Please clarify. So the interfacility transfer allows you to return a patient that is a resident of your area, that is within your service area, to your service area, whether that be to their home or to another destination or to another healthcare facility. The word that really stands out to me in this, and the difference in the question here, and the requirement from the 501 and the requirement from the 555 is emergency. So emergent transports and to me that's including emergency interfacility transports, those are time sensitive. The patient is critical, moments matter, and that falls on the agency that services that area, that has the service area of that facility. Now, there is a requirement that if you can't make an emergent transport within 10 minutes, you have to contact the next closest appropriate agency. Again, this all hinges on the word emergency and emergent. So making that delineation for the call is critical, and I think we can all just kind of decide that we're going to err on the side of the patient. If it looks emergent, let's make it emergent and make sure that the patient gets the best care they can. Is a CON, certificate of need, required to apply for a Class 6 license? So yes, CON is required for all levels of licensure with our office. And anything, if you have any questions about that process, we're not involved in the CON process, but you can contact the Cabinet for Health and Family Services. They're happy to help you with that. The Class 6 specifically, whether it be BLS and they want to get a license with KBEMS, or ALS, that's the first response category, then you can contact the CON office and roll through the process there. But once you get your CON, we internally, we kind of call that the golden ticket. Once you get the golden ticket, you can come here and apply for a license. We're going to get into a lot of questions about the BLS first response. Many of the answers are going to be the same. Hang with me. I want to answer and make these as clear as possible. Is the non-licensed BLS first response agency required to have separate agreement with a medical director, or can the medical director be covered by the Class 1 agency's medical director via the mutual aid agreement? If covered by the Class 1 agency's medical director, does the Class 1 agency medical director agreement need to reflect that the Class 1 agency? I would go through all of these, but like these were left intentionally ambiguous. We wanted to allow you guys as the Class 1, or you guys that are Class 1 agency administrators, the opportunity to define these. You're required to address them in, it's stated in the ground agency regulations what you're supposed to address. How you address those is left up to you guys at the local level. I put on here the simple answer that it is up to the Class 1 agency to define each of the items required within their agreement with the BLS first response agency, whether that be medical direction, whether it be communications, whether it be quality assurance. All of those processes are required, but it allows you all to define at what level those are required. You all get to say whether or not you do QA for them, whether they do their own QA and just report to you. Those items are completely up to you guys. It's just that you have to address them within your agreement. All right, so what BLS protocols should be used if a non-licensed BLS first response agency does not have an MOU with the Class 1 agency? If using state protocols, can the non-licensed BLS first response agency restrict the scope of practice or restrict the BLS protocol for BLS responders of that agency? I.e. not authorize the administration of albuterol or epinephrine. If a non-licensed BLS first response agency has an MOU with a Class 1 agency, and are the Class 1 agency's BLS protocols followed? If the Class 1, guys, again, these are all things that have to be addressed within the agreement, but can be addressed at the local level. Now, if you give protocols to a BLS first response agency and you restrict further than what yours are, or open further than what yours are, those have to be approved within our office by the KBEMS medical advisor. Specifically, if you're going to broaden them, I don't know why anybody would allow a BLS agency or a BLS first response agency to do more than their own employees, but I just want to address that for the sake of addressing it. So what issues must be addressed under the response protocols? HIPAA, social media issues, If a non-licensed BLS first response agency is allowing non-certified personnel to respond to medical emergencies, is the Class 1 agency required to notify KBEMS? Is there a minimum equipment requirement for non-licensed BLS first response agencies, either with or without an MOU with a Class 1 agency? Again, address them locally, address them as part of your agreement with those agencies. Now, if somebody is going outside of, if you have an agreement with someone and they are going outside those, the agreement, then yes, you can report it here through our complaint process. You can file a complaint within, you can go to our legal tab, you'll find the legal document or the complaint form there, fill it out, have it notarized, send it in, and we'll do an investigation. But you all get to define at what level those things are addressed locally. We would establish geographic service area as the BLS first response area, agency's fire protection district. Are there any restrictions to allowing response to other areas of the Class 1 agency's geographic service area at the Class 1 agency's request? These are within the mutual aid agreements. If the Class 1 agency and the BLS first response agency want to do that, but there's also probably a level of it that it has to be within, from BLS first response agency to another BLS first response agency, depending upon whether they're licensed or non-licensed. There's a couple of different things at play here, but they all have to be spelled out within the mutual aid agreement. If a non-licensed BLS first response agency does not have an MOU with a Class 1 agency, what training and documentation are required above current certification? There's really no requirements for documentation from a non-licensed BLS agency. We'll address those items with the local Class 1 agency if they have an agreement, but if they don't, you know, they're kind of on their own at that point. Now, with that said, if a non-licensed agency has certified or licensed individuals, EMTs, paramedics, AEMTs, and they are acting in their capacity and they do not have medical direction, they are operating without a medical license. So understand that you would be subject to disciplinary action should you get reported. So if you're on an agency that does not have medical direction, you don't have protocols, you're pretty much on your own. So it is to your benefit or to the benefit of the agencies within your area to affiliate or to get their own license, because otherwise you're really putting your employees or your volunteers in harm's way, because they can really get in a lot of trouble for acting outside of their scope, because in that capacity they're really not an EMT or a paramedic, but if they act as one, you're in a world of hurt. So if a non-licensed BLS first response agency has an MOU with a Class 1 agency, is the Class 1 agency required to provide or verify training certification of the non-licensed BLS first response agency's BLS providers, or is a requirement in an MOU requiring the non-licensed BLS first response agency to verify training certification sufficient? This is not something we're going to check during the inspection process. Training certification requirements that are addressed in the agreement should be retained by the BLS first response agency. It's not required, but I would strongly recommend that records retention be something that you address within the agreement between the Class 1 and the BLS first response agency as well. Who holds those records, how long you hold those records. Those are, while it's not a required item in that agreement, strongly suggested. Excuse me. What does quality assurance process need to address, and what are the responsibilities of each agency and the medical director? I think this is in reference to the agreement between the Class 1 and the BLS first response agencies, because the language of quality assurance process is used in that as well. Again, these are really items that just need to be addressed. It's not, we didn't spell them out specifically on purpose, just because we wanted you all as the local agencies to have a little bit of oversight over them. So you get to kind of define how tight or how loose you want that belt to be. So again, that's really up to you guys. Are non-licensed BLS first response agencies required to have the same liability limits as a licensed agency? I'll stop right there and just go through. And again, these are all items that need to be addressed within the agreement. We're not going to set a ceiling or a floor on these. You guys really get to address these at the local level. If a non-licensed BLS first response agency is unable to obtain an MOU with a Class 1 agency, what additional documentation is required of the non-licensed BLS first response agency? The only documentation required is the verification of the denial. So if you, as a BLS first response agency, have tried to affiliate with the Class 1 agency and they just won't, then really the only thing you have to retain is verification that the denial occurred, or at least your attempts to try to get the verification. We know sometimes you won't even get a response. So just retain your attempts. Who's responsible for the enforcement or verification of the requirements? Can KBEMS certified licensed providers be individually disciplined for affiliation and or response for a non-licensed BLS first response agency that is not in compliance with regulations? If there's no agreement, then we're not going to hold your agency responsible for the actions of somebody that's on within another organization or on another department. Those individuals in that agency are responsible, not you. I mean, especially if they're not at all affiliated or under your purview. Again, this one's about the securing device. Define the appropriate securing device. Is there a minimum amount of force that must be accounted for in restraining items? Does this regulation apply to ambulances with open shells instead of cabinets? If using webbing to secure items, is there a maximum opening size between the webbing straps? We didn't define these. We didn't get down to that minutia level. You know, as I said earlier, the securing device has to be commercially manufactured and designed for the purpose of securing that device, or it has to be a securing device, i.e. a seat belt or some other type of device that is permanently mounted to the structure of the vehicle. So to address the part about the open shells instead of cabinets, all ambulances that are permitted by us have to meet the regulation. So if that means that closing in some of those shelves or however that's done, it just for our purposes they have to meet the regulation. So you have to be able to stow all the items that you have. Can't just and really, guys, I want to address why this was put in here. I think it's important that you all understand why. There's so many ambulance accidents that result in head injuries from the monitor, the bag flying around. They're finding more and more that those projectiles are causing more harm than the actual impact with the ambulance. You all know those monitors, it seems like they're not getting any lighter. And in some cases, it feels like they may be getting heavier. And regardless, even a smaller monitor flying around the back of an ambulance and smacking you in the head can cause permanent damage. And that's the reason that we wanted to have these. And it's actually a safety standard that's within the new within any of the new vehicle standards, the GVS, the KKK, the NFPA. New ambulances have to have this stuff. So we just felt like we knew that there was a safety standard out there, and we couldn't just ignore it. So this is really for the safety of the occupants, whether it be a patient or a crew member. It, being the regulation, states that we must have a minimum of 2 complete sets suitable for adult and pediatric populations. Does this mean 1 of each size will suffice, or do we need 2 of each size? You need to have 2 of each size. So have to have a total of 4. You have to have a backup for each set. We've all had equipment failures, and that's no fun place to be. All right, so that's the end of the FAQs. So what we'll do now is we'll start taking some of the questions from you guys. Let me see if I can pull back up myself. I'm super interested in watching myself, but all right. Chuck, do you want to enable your audio? What time are we here? 2:43.
Yeah,
I've been
Paul.
talking entirely too long.
Yeah, Paul, I'm typing some of these questions in as we get them. And if you want to start with the first one, I'm going to copy some of these over for logging, and then I'll jump in on the second one.
Okay, trying to pull up the screen here. For some reason, I'm having a hard time getting full screen.
First question is, can I use time cards for staff scheduling? That would be for the 12 months of previous scheduling.
Yes, you can. The problem may be delineating out what would be medic versus EMT. So as long as it states on there, you know, we're not going to we're going to check these as thoroughly as we can. With that said, you all have to understand we're not going to spend hours on end checking your staffing.
Okay, Paul, if you want to mute, I'll go through some of these one at a time. There's a few coming in. So number
Mute
2,
me?
if you'd like to mute just so we don't feedback off each other. But I don't think we're having any problems right now. There's a question, BLS service doesn't have to have a paramedic, correct? That's correct. If it's a class 1 BLS service, a class 2 BLS service, class 4 industrial BLS service, they do not have to have a paramedic on board. Let me see. Next, someone asked, W. Isaacs asked, can we receive a copy of both documents? I believe they're asking, Paul, for a copy of the PowerPoint and a copy of the finalized inspection manual, and we can definitely provide those.
Yeah, so the inspection manual may actually be in the form section now. I had sent it over to Drew Chandler to post on our website probably 15 minutes before we started this. Hopefully it's up. If not, it'll be up by tomorrow.
Okay, great.
But we're definitely going to we'll post the PowerPoint as well as we'll post that along with the recording of this.
And next, Frank asked, what's considered communication devices to meet the requirement to meet 2 communication devices? There's several questions that we'll receive and that we've received regarding the 2-way portable communication devices. Those regulations have been modified slightly. The mobile device, and this goes into Ms. LaFontaine's question that's next. The mobile radios are now required. All ambulances, all licensed ambulances are required to have mobile radios, mounted mobile radios with a access point and a microphone available in the patient and the driver's compartment of the vehicle. That's for communication with other agencies, hospital emergency departments, and your local dispatch center. So you are required to have a control point, not necessarily separate radios, but you are required to have a control point accessible to both the driver's compartment and the passenger compartment. And as far as the portable communication devices, Frank, Each vehicle is required to have 2 portable communication devices. Push to talk is preferable. One of those devices can be substituted by a cellular phone, but you do have to have the vehicle, or at least one of the personnel that staffs a vehicle is required to have a push to talk portable radio. And if you don't have one for each of the staff, each of the 2 staff that staff the vehicle, one of those devices can be substituted by a cellular device. Ron Temple, we still do paper run sheets. Is it required to use electronic now? Yes, sir. It is. I'm not sure where you're located, but we've been requiring electronic submission of data since 2016. And if you haven't received communication from us about not submitting electronically, you may not be licensed with us because we send several communications out. We've been collecting electronically. Yeah.
So just real quick, some agencies will have their billing company
do it for
their data entry.
Okay.
And maybe they're doing paper. So just an FYI.
Okay. Let me see. I don't want to miss anything here. Anne, I missed part of this. Did you address the radio issue? Does a portable radio count as one in the back of the truck? And Paul, you want to address that one? We discussed that earlier today. I think the answer is no, according to the way the regulation is written.
Yeah, the regulation is pretty clear that it actually says that states mobile, which is not a portable. And not to try to be a smart aleck, but Chuck and I actually had some debate about that, and just the fact that it states mobile is the hinge point there. So it does require that they be mobile and not portable radios.
And Brent James asked, does the temporary ambulance regulation apply to an agency that has to borrow an ambulance from another licensed agency?
Yes. I mean, that's, again, when I define new ambulance, that's really just anything that's new to your fleet for that moment. Now, if it goes off and comes back, again, it's new. But you're allowed to use an agency's ambulance for the purpose of a temporary shortage, emergent situation. Again, like a lot of agencies will borrow an ambulance, put it in their bay, leave it there, and in the event of the blank moment when you need an ambulance to go out on the street, you've got it. So, but they don't necessarily let us know. You have 24 hours after you put it in service to notify us. So that allows you just to kind of hang it out in the back and use it in those emergency situations.
Okay, let me see what's next here. If a service has adopted the state protocols as is, will they be required to maintain stock of all medications noted in the state protocols? And I'd like to address this one because there's a lot of confusion on this. And we do about twice a year, sometimes 3 to 4 times a year, we do a modification or an amendment to the state protocol. And if you're a state protocol adopter and you have adopted the state protocols, when they're updated, you automatically are updated and have 30 days to update your staff on changes and modifications and to update those locally. We do send correspondence out to you to notate that. But because there's a medication reference list in the back of the state protocol manual that's always been there, there was some confusion about whether that was a master medication list. You'll notice in that that medication reference list in the back of the manual, there's medications such as TPA, heparin, streptokinase, things like that, that we realize that you don't use on your ambulance. So what we've done is Paul and I, Dr. Martin, went through and made a master medication list for the state protocol, and it's towards the front of the manual before you actually get into the protocols now. And the master medication list includes the medications that are required. It lists some medications that are optional, and it lists some medications that you could use either one medication or another. For instance, I think one of the medications, without looking it up, is like our benzos. We understand that there were some shortages of some benzos. So for seizure activity, uncontrolled seizure activity, or status epilepticus, you could use Ativan, Valium, or Versed. but you would need to have one or more of those. But that master medication list is towards the front of the manual now. I think it's in the 20s, pages 20s or something like that. But that is your master medication list. The list that is in the back of the manual is not the master medication list. Rather,
just a reference.
It's a reference manual, right? Let me see. We got a lot of these coming in, so give me a second. Okay, what happens when a Class 1 agency does not have an agreement with the BLS First Response Agency and that agency continues to provide services that they do not have a medical director nor license to provide services for? What can be done from there? And do you want to take that one, Paul, or I can take it? It doesn't matter.
Either one of us can answer. I think we're going to be on the same page here.
Yeah.
You'll need to report that through a complaint, and we'll investigate. The unfortunate thing is that many times it'll fall to the individual provider, who really and honestly, we as paramedics and EMTs, it's on us to know whether or not we have medical direction or protocol. And while the agency may be ultimately responsible, a lot of times, unfortunately, it falls to the individual provider. And you can answer, further if you want to.
Sure. The one provision in there, if you read the regulation really carefully, and there was a lot of back and forth on BLS first response agencies, there is a delineation and a difference between a licensed Class 6 BLS first response agency and a non-licensed BLS first response agency. An agency has the ability to affiliate with a Class 1 licensed agency through a lot of the agreements that you discussed, Paul. They also have the ability, if they're unable to affiliate, they're unable to get along locally. We see this all over the state, and that's where a lot of these questions come from, is people just can't get along locally, which we wish we would be better at. But in those instances, the Class 1 agency or the BLS First Response Agency that is providing care that's above the level of first aid and CPR, that's crucial as well, that they are providing an EMT level or an EMR level of care, and not simply first aid and CPR, which we do not regulate. But if they are providing BLS level care or above, they can affiliate, or BLS level care and non-licensed, they can affiliate with the Class 1. They also have the ability to obtain a certificate of need as a Class 6 BLS First Response Agency. There's also a loophole in there, just to be completely transparent with you, that if a Class 1 agency refuses to affiliate with a non-licensed Class 6 BLS service, the Class 6 service can begin operations if they can provide proof of good faith effort to affiliate with a Class 1 agency within the jurisdiction. That being said, going back to what you said earlier, Paul, if that happens, they have to go through all the same processes that they would have in affiliation with a local agency, such as they won't be licensed with us, but you have to have medical direction, you have to have protocols, you have to have verification of liability insurance. So first choice for most of our BLS first response agencies that are non-licensed, affiliate, collaborate, and get along. Second choice, if they can't do that and they want to do things the right way, get a license as a Class 6 BLS licensed first response agency for the same jurisdiction. Third and final option is you try to affiliate. The Class 1 agency refuses to affiliate with you for whatever reason, and the non-licensed Class 6 BLS agency can provide good faith, can provide documentation that they've attempted to affiliate through written letters and things of that nature. And then they have to go through their own process of getting a medical director, getting their own liability insurance, and meeting protocol standards and all these types of things. But if they have not done any of those things, they're not a Class 6 non-licensed BLS First Response Agency that is affiliated with the Class 1, they don't have a Class 6 BLS First Response license, and they are not a non-licensed First Response Agency that is sought to affiliate but been unable to, and they're functioning in the capacity with no medical direction, no protocols, minimal or no liability insurance, et cetera. Those are the people that need to be reported to us, and they need to be reported not as an agency because we don't recognize them as an agency. The individuals that responded need to be reported to us through the complaint procedure. That is long and convoluted, and it was very complex to write, and there was a lot of political back and forth when we were writing that to try to get anything regarding basic life support first response agencies included at any level. But that's where we're at. And I'm going to try to move to the next one. Apologize for the
one. Let's do that. Let's do that.
Okay. Workstation 5, can you define volunteer as it relates to education records? Are we only referencing volunteers with a licensed ambulance service? Can you take that one, Paul, while I try to type some of these out?
Yeah, I don't really honestly, I don't know if we define volunteer. I think I use the word just out of knowledge that I know that some of the agencies do operate as volunteer. If they are affiliated with your agency, if you retain them, whether it be on a volunteer status or a paid status, then they are subject to all the requirements and responsibilities that any paid employee would be. Did I answer the question, Chuck? Or you don't know, you're typing?
No, I believe you did. And we've had this before too, as far as volunteers versus paid staff. Volunteers, as far as we're concerned, if they're affiliated with your agency and they're on your agency roster, that's a big thing with us. If they make ambulance runs for your ambulance service, whether they're in a paid or unpaid or partially paid volunteer capacity, you have to have they're an employee, right? Whether if they're on your roster, they're an employee, and you have to track records and they're held to the same standard as a paid employee, whether they volunteer their time or not. Paul, I'm going to give you this next one. If you can, I need to look up the next question. Do boxes purchased before 1/1/2019 that are going to be remounted on new chassis purchased after January 1st, 19 need to be CAS certified?
Simply no. So if you look at that chart, anything purchased or remounted after 1/1/19, you go back to the original manufacturer standard. So the standard that was in effect at the time of you purchasing it. So if you purchased it in 1/1/2015 and you remount it in 2020, you're still held to the triple K standard that was in effect in 2015. Yeah, this is going to be a nightmare for us as well, just trying to figure out where it's all at. I see that a couple of the field staff are on here, and I'm sure their heads are spinning as well. So, yeah, you go back to the original, the standard that was in effect upon original manufacture. With that said, if you buy a new ambulance on January 2nd of next year, 2019, then you have it remounted in 18 months, then yes, you are held to the CAS GVS standard. And hopefully that's made pretty clear in that table that I put in the inspection manual. I tried to make that as clear as possible without being too wordy and without taking up 3 or 4 pages. But just, it is what it is.
Okay, next question is the radio requirements in the regulations? Where can I find these requirements? I looked that up. It's in 202 KAR 7555. It's the 555 regulation on page 5, letter C. So it looks like section 3 of the 555 regulation, section 3. Section 318C and D on page 5 of the 555 reg.
Yeah, it's under operating requirements, I think.
Next question that I've got, meant by electronic is we write on paper run sheets. Can we still do that? Or they have to be on a device, an iPad, etc.? We only have requirements for data submission. So how you document the chart is up to you. When we talk to agencies, we recommend, so they don't have to do double duty and do electronic or do paper documentation and then have someone else or come back to the station and rewrite the run report in an electronic medium for data submission requirements. There's just so many different data platforms out there. We have data platforms out there through ImageTrend Elite that are paid for with state funds that you can get at a local level at no cost to you, that will allow you to do your patient documentation. It will integrate with billing software that many of you use, and it will immediately link your charts up to KBEMS and the K-STAR system for web service to the NMSIS web service in Utah. So for any of our agencies to continue to be able to continue to use paper, understand that a lot of people never wanted to get away from paper, but the data submission is mandatory. And if you're doing paper and then having to come back and rechart it again in an electronic format, you're just doing double duty. And I understand that there have been some agencies that, like you suggested, Paul, they're doing on paper, and then they are having the either a billing agency or a clerk transcribe those into electronic medium. That's not the intent of data submission and electronic documentation. If you've documented a certain portion of patient care and that is transcribed incorrectly by someone else, it really foggies the intent of electronic data submission and our ability to monitor and help to improve the patient care process. Last question that I have here is emergent request for interfacility transport.
Chuck, you there?
Yeah, can you get this one?
Thank you. Yeah. So emergent request for interfacility transport, whose definition of emergency, and if multiple mutual aid agencies are not able to meet the request, then what actions should be taken next? So, previously we had a requirement that you had to define emergent. This can be defined within your, you have a requirement to ensure that all calls are answered promptly. You can address that within there. To answer the mutual aid question, you just keep going down the line. I mean, you may end up where it may be that your agency is going to be the quickest one there, and that's just the way it is. But if you keep going down the line and multiple agencies can't take it, you just kind of roll to the agency that's available first. I mean, it happens and it stinks, but sometimes patients just have to wait until you can get somebody there. If you don't have them, you don't have them.
Thanks, Paul. Next question is, how will you verify staffing schedules? Paper, electronic, word of mouth? Will a staffing SOP or SOG suffice for it? And I can get that one. The word of mouth is not going to work at all. We need
nor will an SOP or SOG.
Right. No,
we're going to actually have to see the schedules. It can be paper. I can honestly tell you that it'll be a whole lot easier on you and I, as an agency administrator, if you present it to me in an organized fashion and not just lay out a bunch of basically Post-it notes. Don't throw up a bunch of those to me and make me sort through them. But electronic would be probably the easiest if you have scheduling software, staffing software. that you use, that would be probably the easiest thing to see done. But I can't say that we won't take, I definitely won't say that we won't take paper, because we will, but just in an organized fashion. We don't want to just get a box full of pieces of paper.
Well, and if you're going to submit paper schedules, they may be requested to be uploaded as part of the desk review, as part of their 30-day out desk review, because it's just very time consuming to go through, and a lot of times those will be spot checked for paramedic staffing and adequate staffing. And we've had questions in the past about people manipulating scheduling to make it appear that their scheduling is not what it is. And I can assure you all that I've been doing this a long time. We've all been doing this a long time, and there's ways we can find out if the schedule's been modified. Or, we can go to payroll records, we can go to electronic chart reporting, and we investigate. I don't like doing it. I just assume everything be really easy. It would make our job a lot easier, but I'm not worried. I'm not worried about people manipulating their scheduling, because if we have to investigate it, we'll find it. But we definitely need good documentation of the scheduling for 12 months. And if you do it on we've talked about, if you do it on a dry erase board or something like that, take a picture of it, and save it. We use electronic, but it doesn't designate what unit they're assigned to. Ours is left to shift supervisors as to unit assignments. Well, and what we're going to be looking for is that you have an adequate number of personnel per assigned vehicle that day. So if you have 8 vehicles in service, a minimum of 25% of those on-duty vehicles will need to be staffed by a paramedic, and you'll need to have at least 2 EMTs on the other vehicles. In the event that you utilize rapid response or chase vehicles, then you'll need to have at least 2 paramedics available in response vehicles to be able to staff each of those 8 vehicles in the event. That's all we've got, Paul.
Chuck, do you have anything you want to add? I don't want to run off here and leave a stone unturned. I'm sure there's something we didn't hit. And again, guys, you're welcome to submit questions through a ticket in our on the KBEMS website, KYEMS.com, and go down to the ticket. Is it a hexagon, Chuck?
Yes.
And then you can submit a ticket through there. I'm glad to provide clarification. We're definitely, Chuck has compiled all these so that we can put out responses to them so that everyone can do it. I know that there's a group in the western part of the state that are meeting tomorrow to review this webinar. So first off, kudos to you guys for taking a couple hours out of your Wednesday afternoon and listening to me ramble. But Chuck and I have talked about this. We wanted to make sure that we got you all the best information, and you all need to know what we expect. I think that's important, that you all know what we're going to look for, how we're going to look for it, and how it's going to be enforced. So that's really the real reason for wanting to get this out here. And again, we're going to post this to the website. It'll be available for you all to review. We're going to post up the responses to the FAQ, and we'll include the PowerPoint along with it. And but again, guys, have a Merry Christmas. Chuck, do you have anything you want to add?
No, just don't forget to save the recording.
That's it. That's a housekeeping thing. We've done that before.
Thank you all for participating today. We appreciate it very much.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.